The old pickup truck bounced along the dusty road, its engine making strange noises that would worry most people. But Maya Chen wasn't most people. She had dreamed of this moment for 3 years, ever since she first saw photos of the ancient rock paintings hidden deep in the Arizona desert. Maya was 28 years old and spent most of her time buried in books about ancient cultures. She worked at the university, studying how people lived thousands of years ago. Her small apartment was filled with pictures of cave paintings, old pottery pieces, and maps of places most people had never heard of. "You're crazy to go alone," her professor had told her just last week. Dr. Rodriguez had been studying ancient cultures for 40 years. He knew the desert better than almost anyone. "That area is dangerous. No cell towers, no roads, nothing but sand and rocks for miles." But Maya had made up her mind. Her research money was running out, and this trip was her last chance to finish her studies. She needed to find and photograph the rock paintings that early settlers had written about in their journals. These paintings could prove that different tribes had met and traded in that area hundreds of years ago. She packed her truck carefully. Water bottles filled the back seat. She brought enough food for 5 days, even though she planned to be back in 3. Her camera equipment was wrapped in soft blankets to protect it from the bumpy ride. She had maps, a compass, and a GPS device that cost her 2 months of grocery money. The morning she left was perfect. The sun was just coming up, painting the sky pink and orange. Maya felt excited and a little scared at the same time. She had been camping before, but never alone, and never in such a remote place. As she drove away from the city, the buildings got smaller and farther apart. Soon there were just gas stations and small diners every few miles. Then even those disappeared. The road got narrower and bumpier. Her truck worked harder to climb the hills. Maya stopped at the last gas station before entering the desert. It was a tiny place with faded signs and an old man behind the counter. He looked at her with concern when she bought more water and snacks. "Where you headed, miss?" he asked, his voice rough from years of desert wind. "Research trip," Maya answered, not wanting to give too many details. The old man shook his head. "That desert out there isn't forgiving." "You got people expecting you back?" Maya nodded, though she wasn't sure if her professor would notice if she was a day or 2 late. She lived alone and her parents were far away in California. Still, she had told people where she was going. Someone would look for her eventually. The last stretch of road was barely a road at all. It was more like a path that other vehicles had worn into the dirt over many years. Maya's truck shook and rattled as she drove deeper into the desert. Mountains rose up around her like sleeping giants. The sun was getting higher and hotter. 20 miles from the gas station, her GPS started acting strange. The little screen flickered and went black. Maya pulled over and tried to restart it, but nothing happened. She looked at her paper maps, but they weren't detailed enough to show exactly where she was. "It's okay," she told herself out loud, her voice echoing in the quiet truck. "I know the general direction. The paintings are supposed to be near that tall rock formation." She pointed toward a strange-shaped mountain in the distance. It looked like a giant finger pointing at the sky. According to the old journal she had studied, the rock paintings were in caves near that formation. Maya kept driving. The temperature was rising fast. Even with the air conditioning running, sweat formed on her forehead. The landscape around her was beautiful but harsh. Tall cactus plants stood like soldiers against the bright blue sky. Small lizards darted across the path. In the distance, she could see heat waves making everything shimmer like water. She had studied this desert in books, but being here was completely different. The silence was deeper than anything she had ever experienced. When she turned off the engine to check her map, the only sounds were the wind whistling through rocks and the distant cry of a hawk circling overhead. The path got rougher as she got closer to the rock formation. Sometimes Maya wasn't sure she was still following a path at all, but she kept going, driven by the excitement of discovery. Somewhere out there were paintings made by people who had lived here, when the world was very different. Their stories were waiting to be found. As the sun reached the middle of the sky, Maya finally saw what she was looking for. A cluster of caves opened up in the red rock walls ahead. Her heart beat faster with excitement. She had made it. Now the real work could begin. She parked the truck in whatever shade she could find and grabbed her backpack. The heat hit her like a wall when she stepped outside. Even though she had prepared for it, the desert heat was more intense than she had imagined. Maya looked back at her truck one last time, then headed toward the caves. She had no idea that this moment would change everything. She had no way of knowing that her careful plans were about to fall apart, or that her survival would soon depend on the kindness of a stranger who lived by ancient wisdom. All she knew was that she was finally here, in the place she had dreamed about for so long. The desert stretched endlessly in every direction, beautiful and dangerous and full of secrets waiting to be discovered. Maya spent her first day exploring the caves with pure joy. The rock paintings were even more amazing than she had hoped. Ancient hands had created images of hunters, animals, and strange symbols that seemed to tell stories from long ago. She took hundreds of photos as the light changed throughout the day, showing different details in the artwork. But on the second morning, everything went wrong. Maya woke up in her small tent to a strange hissing sound. She unzipped the tent flap and saw steam rising from under the hood of her truck. Her heart sank immediately. In the desert heat, steam from a vehicle was never a good sign. She opened the hood carefully, jumping back as hot steam billowed out. Even someone who knew nothing about cars could see the problem. Green liquid had sprayed everywhere under the hood. The radiator was cracked and all the coolant had leaked out onto the sandy ground. No, 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 Maya whispered, staring at the mess. Without coolant, the engine would overheat in minutes in this climate. Her truck wasn't going anywhere. Maya tried her cell phone, holding it high in the air and walking around the campsite. No signal, not even one bar. She had expected this, but seeing the empty signal indicator still made her stomach twist with worry. She sat on a rock and tried to think clearly. The smart thing would be to stay with the truck and wait for help. Someone would eventually come looking for her. The old man at the gas station had seen her. Her professor knew roughly where she had gone, but how long would it take? And did anyone really know exactly where she was? Maya realized with growing fear that she hadn't been very specific about her location. The desert was huge and she could be anywhere within hundreds of square miles. As the day got hotter, another problem became clear. She had brought enough water for 3 days of normal activity, but in this heat, just sitting still, she was drinking much more than planned. By evening, she had already finished 2 of her 6 large water bottles. Maya spent a restless night in her tent, listening to strange sounds in the darkness. Coyotes howled in the distance. Something rustled around her campsite, probably looking for food scraps. Every sound made her more aware of how alone she was. On the morning of her 3rd day, Maya made a decision that would later seem incredibly foolish. Instead of staying with her truck, she decided to hike toward higher ground to look for help or a cell phone signal. She packed a small backpack with her remaining water, some energy bars, her phone, and a small first aid kit. She left most of her gear in the truck, planning to come back by evening. The caves where she had found the paintings were in a valley, but she could see hills rising in the distance. Maybe from up there she could spot a road or a building. The desert looked different when you were walking through it instead of driving. Maya had never realized how tiring it was to walk on sand and loose rocks. Every step took extra effort. The sun seemed to press down on her shoulders like a heavy blanket. After 2 hours of hiking, Maya climbed to the top of a ridge. She looked around in all directions, hoping to see signs of civilization. Instead, she saw only more desert stretching to the horizon. No roads, no buildings, no people, just endless brown and red landscape under the blazing sun. Maya tried her phone again. Still nothing. She was beginning to panic, but she forced herself to stay calm. She could still find her way back to the truck. She had been careful to remember landmarks along the way. But when Maya turned to go back, nothing looked familiar anymore. The desert had too many similar rocks and hills. What had seemed like obvious markers on the way up now looked like everything else around them. She spent the next several hours walking in circles, getting more lost and more frightened. The sun was getting lower, which meant she had been gone much longer than planned. Worse, she was almost out of water. The small amount she had brought was nearly gone. As darkness fell, Maya was forced to admit the horrible truth. She was completely lost. She had no idea which direction led back to her truck. She had no water, very little food, and no shelter except the clothes on her back. Maya found a spot between 2 large rocks that would provide some protection from the wind. She curled up on the hard ground and tried not to think about all the things that could go wrong. Wild animals, extreme temperatures, dehydration. Her mind raced with fears. The desert night was surprisingly cold after the blazing heat of the day. Maya shivered in her thin shirt, wishing she had brought warmer clothes. Above her head, stars filled the sky like diamonds scattered on black cloth. In any other situation, she would have found it beautiful. But tonight, the vast, star-filled sky only reminded her of how small and lost she was. Somewhere out there was her truck with her supplies and equipment. Somewhere far away were people who cared about her. But here, in this moment, Maya was more alone than she had ever been in her life. She tried to sleep, but every sound made her jump. The desert was full of life at night. Things moved in the darkness around her hiding spot. Maya pulled her knees to her chest and counted the hours until dawn, wondering if she would survive to see another sunset. Maya woke up on her fourth morning in the desert feeling like she was moving through a bad dream. Her mouth felt like it was full of cotton, and her head pounded with each heartbeat. She had finished her last drops of water the night before. The sun was already hot, even though it was still early. Maya knew she had to find water soon or she wouldn't survive another day. She had read about desert survival in books, but actually living it was terrifyingly different. She remembered something about morning dew, so she pressed her shirt against rocks and plants, trying to collect tiny drops of moisture. After an hour of work, she managed to squeeze a few drops of water into her mouth. It wasn't much, but it gave her a small burst of hope. Maya also remembered reading about barrel cactus. These round, spiky plants supposedly contained water inside. She found one and spent nearly an hour carefully cutting through its thick skin with a small knife from her keychain. Inside was a pulpy, bitter-tasting substance that was barely wet. She forced herself to eat some, gagging at the awful taste. Walking was getting harder. The loose sand seemed to grab at her feet with every step. Maya's lips were already cracking from the dry air, and the skin on her arms was turning red despite the sunscreen she had applied days ago. By the fifth day, Maya was stumbling more than walking. Her vision kept going blurry, and sometimes she saw things that weren't there. Once she was sure she saw a lake in the distance, but when she struggled toward it, there was nothing but more sand and rocks. The hallucinations were getting worse. Maya would see buildings that turned out to be strangely shaped rocks. She saw people walking toward her who disappeared when she got closer. Most frighteningly, she sometimes couldn't remember where she was or how she had gotten there. Maya tried to keep a journal during these days, writing in a small notebook she always carried. Her handwriting, normally neat and careful, became shaky and hard to read. Day 5, she wrote with trembling fingers. Can't find water. Everything looks the same. Mom, if someone finds this, I'm sorry I didn't call you more often. The desert heat was like nothing Maya had ever experienced. During the day, the temperature climbed above 110 degrees. The sun felt like it was burning right through her skin. She tried to travel only in early morning and evening, hiding in whatever shade she could find during the hottest hours. But finding shade was almost impossible. The desert plants were small and scattered. Sometimes Maya would squeeze herself under a tiny overhang of rock, pressing her body against the cooler stone. She learned to appreciate even the smallest patch of shadow. The nights were almost as bad as the days, but for different reasons. When the sun went down, the temperature dropped dramatically. Maya would shiver uncontrollably, her body too weak to generate much heat. She tried to stay warm by doing exercises, but she barely had energy to move. Wild animals seemed to sense her weakness. Coyotes came closer to her resting spots at night. During the day, buzzards circled overhead, following her as she walked. Maya tried not to think about what that meant. On the 6th morning, Maya could barely stand up. Her legs felt like they were made of rubber, and black spots danced in front of her eyes every time she moved quickly. She had given up trying to find her truck or any specific destination. Now she was just moving, hoping to stumble across help by accident. Maya's thoughts became confused and jumbled. Sometimes she forgot she was lost and wondered why she was walking through the desert. Other times she had long conversations with people who weren't there. She talked to her parents, her professor, even her childhood dog. The worst part was the constant, overwhelming thirst. Maya's tongue felt swollen in her mouth. Her throat was so dry it hurt to swallow. She found herself licking rocks that looked wet, even though they were completely dry. She tried every survival trick she could remember or think of. She looked for animal tracks that might lead to water. She dug in low spots where water might collect. She even tried following birds, thinking they might lead her to a water source. Nothing worked. By afternoon of the 6th day, Maya was crawling more than walking. Her knees were scraped and bleeding from the rough ground. Her hands were cut from grabbing at rocks to pull herself forward. But she kept moving because stopping felt like giving up completely. Maya found herself talking out loud more and more, even when she knew no one could hear her. Just keep moving, she told herself over and over. Someone will find you. Someone has to find you. But deep down, Maya was starting to accept that she might not survive. The desert was vast, and she was just one small person lost in its immensity. She began to think about the people she loved and the things she wished she had said to them. As the sun started to set on what might be her last day, Maya spotted something that gave her a tiny spark of hope. In the distance, she could see a large mesquite tree. It wasn't much, but it would provide shade and a place to rest. With her last burst of energy, Maya crawled toward the tree. When she finally reached it, she collapsed in its shadow, too exhausted to move another inch. The ground was hard and rocky, but after days of exposure, even this small shelter felt like a blessing. Maya closed her eyes and tried to prepare herself for what might come next. She had done everything she could think of to survive. Now all she could do was hope that somehow, some way, help would find her before it was too late. Maya lay under the ancient mesquite tree as the sun began to rise on her 7th day in the desert. She could no longer feel her legs properly, and her arms felt like they weighed 100 pounds each. Every breath was an effort, and her heart seemed to skip beats irregularly. The tree above her was old, probably older than anyone she had ever known. Its twisted branches reached out like protective arms, providing the first real shade she had found in days. Maya pressed her cheek against its rough bark and felt strangely comforted by its solid presence. She tried to sit up but couldn't manage it. The simple act of lifting her head made the world spin wildly around her. Maya had read about the final stages of dehydration, and she recognized the signs in herself. Her skin had lost its elasticity. When she pinched the back of her hand, it stayed pinched for several seconds instead of snapping back. Maya's lips were so cracked they had started bleeding. Her tongue felt thick and strange in her mouth. She tried to produce saliva, but there was none left. Her body had shut down all non-essential functions to conserve what little moisture remained. The hallucinations were constant now. Maya saw her childhood home shimmering in the distance. She saw her mother calling to her from across the desert. Sometimes she forgot where she was entirely and tried to get up to go to work or meet friends for lunch. But in her clearer moments, Maya understood exactly what was happening to her. She was dying, alone, in one of the most remote places on Earth. The thought should have terrified her, but instead she felt a strange kind of peace settling over her. Maya pulled out her small notebook one last time. Her hands shook so badly she could barely hold the pencil, and her writing was almost impossible to read. But she wanted to leave some record of her final thoughts. Day 7, she wrote slowly, pausing to rest between each word. I tried so hard. Tell everyone I love them. The desert is beautiful even when it's killing you. As the morning wore on, Maya found herself thinking about her life in ways she never had before. She thought about opportunities she had missed because she was too scared or too busy. She remembered kind words people had said to her that she had never properly acknowledged. Maya also thought about her research, the ancient rock paintings that had brought her to this place. Those unknown artists had lived in the same harsh environment, but they had thrived here. They had known secrets about surviving that she had never learned. The irony wasn't lost on her. The sun climbed higher, and even under the tree's shade, the temperature was rising. Maya could feel her body temperature rising too, as her natural cooling systems failed. She closed her eyes and tried to find some comfort in her memories. She remembered camping trips with her family when she was young. Her father teaching her to identify different types of rocks. Her mother making hot chocolate over a campfire while coyotes howled in the distance. Those had been good times when the wilderness felt like an adventure instead of a death trap. Maya thought about all the books she had read about ancient cultures and survival. She had always admired the strength and wisdom of people who lived close to the land. Now she understood something she had only read about before. There was a difference between surviving and living, between knowing facts and having true knowledge. As the heat of midday approached, Maya felt her consciousness starting to drift. She wasn't sure how much time was passing anymore. Sometimes she thought she was back in her university library, researching her thesis. Other times she was a child again, playing in her grandmother's garden. It was during one of these confused moments that Maya began to pray. She hadn't prayed regularly since she was young, but now the words came naturally, almost without thought. At first she prayed for rescue, for someone to find her before it was too late. But as she continued, her prayers changed. She found herself praying for her research to matter somehow, for her life to have made some small difference in the world. Maya's voice was barely a whisper now, her throat too damaged to produce normal speech, but she continued talking to whatever forces might be listening in the vast silence of the desert. "Please," she whispered, her lips barely moving, "let my work mean something. Let someone else learn what I was trying to learn. Don't let my stories end here in the sand." She prayed for her parents, asking that they would understand she had died doing something she believed in. She prayed for her professor and classmates, hoping they would continue studying the cultures she had found so fascinating. Most of all, Maya prayed for forgiveness. She had made so many mistakes that led her to this place, ignoring advice about traveling alone, leaving her truck, not telling people exactly where she was going. She hoped the people who loved her would remember her good choices instead of her final, fatal ones. As the sun reached its highest point in the sky, Maya's whispered prayers became even quieter. She was speaking to the desert itself now, to the ancient spirits she had studied for so long. She asked them to accept her into this place she had come to love, even as it was taking her life. "I'm sorry I wasn't stronger," she breathed into the hot air. "I'm sorry I couldn't learn your lessons fast enough." Maya closed her eyes and felt herself drifting away from the pain and thirst and heat. She was ready to let go, to become part of the vast timeless landscape that surrounded her. But the desert, it seemed, wasn't quite ready to claim her yet. As Maya's consciousness faded, her whispered words seemed to hang in the air around the old mesquite tree, carrying across the endless expanse of sand and stone, seeking ears that might still hear them and a heart that might still answer. At the exact moment Maya's whispered prayer faded into silence, a figure appeared on the horizon like something from a dream. Through the shimmering heat waves that made everything dance and blur, a man on horseback emerged from the desert landscape as if the earth itself had created him. Joseph Walking Bear had been tracking wild horses for 3 days. At 67 years old, he still moved through the wilderness with the grace and knowledge passed down from generations of his ancestors. He was Lakota, but he was far from his home in South Dakota, following a herd of Mustangs that had wandered much further south than usual. Joseph pulled gently on his horse's reins and stopped on a ridge overlooking the valley. Something felt different about this place, though he couldn't say exactly what. His grandfather had taught him to trust these feelings, to listen when the land spoke to him in ways that had nothing to do with words. His horse, a paint mare named Sky Dancer, shifted restlessly beneath him. Her ears were pointed forward, alert to something Joseph couldn't yet see. He had learned long ago to pay attention when Sky Dancer sensed things before he did. Joseph shaded his eyes with his hand and scanned the desert floor below. At first he saw nothing unusual, just the endless pattern of sand, rock, and scattered desert plants that he had been traveling through for days. But then Sky Dancer nickered softly and took a few steps forward without being asked. That's when Joseph saw it. Far below, in the thin shade of a mesquite tree, there was something that didn't belong in the natural pattern of the landscape. It was too still to be an animal, but too regular in shape to be a rock. Joseph urged Sky Dancer down the slope, moving carefully over the loose stones and sandy patches. As they got closer, what he saw made his heart clench with concern. A young woman lay motionless under the tree, her clothes torn and dirty, her skin burned red by the sun. He dismounted quickly, but approached slowly. Joseph had lived long enough to know that people in desperate situations sometimes reacted unpredictably. But as he got closer, he could see that this woman was beyond being startled. She was barely conscious, her breathing shallow and rapid. "Hey there," Joseph said softly, kneeling beside Maya. His voice was deep and gentle, worn smooth by years of speaking to frightened animals and troubled people. "Can you hear me?" Maya's eyes fluttered open, but she couldn't seem to focus on his face. She tried to speak, but only a small croaking sound came out. Her lips were so damaged from dehydration that they had cracked and bled. Joseph had seen dehydration before, both in animals and people. This woman was very close to dying. He needed to act quickly but carefully. Giving too much water too fast to someone this dehydrated could be dangerous. He reached into his saddlebag and pulled out a water bottle. It was metal, dented from years of use and still cool from the morning air. Joseph poured a small amount into the cap and gently lifted Maya's head. Just a little bit at first, he told her, though he wasn't sure she could understand him. "We need to go slow." Maya felt the cool metal against her lips and tried to drink frantically, but Joseph controlled the flow carefully. Just a few drops at a time, letting her mouth absorb the moisture before giving her more. While she drank, Joseph looked around the area. He could see signs that she had been here for a while. There were marks in the sand where she had crawled to reach the tree. Her clothes and the small backpack beside her told a story of someone who had come, prepared for a short trip but had been caught by circumstances beyond her control. Joseph pulled a bandana from his pocket and wet it with water from his bottle. He placed it gently on Maya's forehead, then used another damp cloth to moisten her cracked lips. These were techniques his grandmother had taught him when he was young, ways of helping someone recover from heat and thirst. "What's your name?" Joseph asked quietly, continuing to give Maya small sips of water. Maya tried to answer, but her voice was still barely a whisper. "Maya," she managed to say, the word barely audible. "Maya," Joseph repeated, giving the name a gentle weight in his deep voice. "I'm Joseph. You're going to be okay now. I'm going to help you." Maya's eyes finally focused on Joseph's face. What she saw there made her feel safer than she had in days. His face was weathered and kind, with deep lines around his eyes that spoke of years spent outdoors. His long gray hair was tied back, and he wore simple clothes that looked like they were made for hard work in difficult places. But it was his eyes that struck Maya most. They were dark and calm, filled with a confidence that came from deep knowledge of how to survive in places like this. When he looked at her, Maya felt like he could see exactly what she needed and knew exactly how to provide it. Joseph continued caring for Maya with steady patience. He created more shade by positioning his horse and using a blanket from his saddle. He gave her water in tiny amounts, waiting between each sip to make sure her body could handle it. He spoke to her in a constant soothing stream of words, sometimes in English and sometimes in his native Lakota. "The horses led me here," Joseph told Maya as he worked. "I've been tracking them for days, but they kept moving in this direction. Now I understand why." Maya didn't fully understand what he meant, but something in his voice suggested he believed their meeting was more than just lucky coincidence. As her mind began to clear with the return of moisture to her body, Maya realized she was experiencing something remarkable. This man had appeared at the exact moment when she had given up hope. He had emerged from the desert like an answer to her whispered prayers, bringing with him not just water and help, but a sense of deep calm and ancient wisdom. Joseph continued to work steadily, never hurrying, never seeming worried or panicked. His movements had the quality of someone who had dealt with emergencies many times before and knew that steady action was more valuable than frantic effort. As the sun moved across the sky and more water entered her system, Maya began to believe something she had stopped believing days ago. She was going to survive this. This stranger, this man who had appeared like a vision from the heat, was going to save her life. Joseph worked through the afternoon with the patience of someone who understood that healing couldn't be rushed. Every few minutes he gave Maya another small sip of water. Between drinks he would wet his bandana and place it on different parts of her body where blood vessels were close to the skin. Her wrists, her neck, her temples. "My grandmother taught me this," Joseph explained as he worked. "When the body gets too hot, you cool it from the places where the blood flows closest to the surface. The whole body cools down faster this way." Maya watched him with growing amazement. Every action Joseph took seemed to come from deep knowledge that had nothing to do with books or formal education. This was wisdom passed down through generations of people who had lived successfully in harsh environments. As Maya's condition slowly improved, Joseph began sharing stories. He spoke in a voice that was both gentle and strong, with the rhythm of someone used to passing on important information through spoken words. "My great-great-grandfather made this journey once," Joseph said, adjusting the blanket that shaded Maya from the afternoon sun. "But he was coming the other way, traveling north with his family when they had to leave their homeland." Joseph's voice carried both sadness and pride as he continued. "They walked for months across country like this. No roads, no maps, just following the stars and reading the signs in the land. Many people died on that journey, but some survived because they knew how to find water in dry places, how to read the weather, how to keep moving when everything seemed hopeless." Maya found herself drawn into Joseph's stories despite her weakness. There was something hypnotic about his voice, something that made her feel connected to a larger human story that went far beyond her own current crisis. "Your people knew this land too. Joseph told her, correctly guessing from her appearance that she came from many different backgrounds. All people who lived close to the earth knew these things once. The knowledge is still there, just forgotten by most. As the sun began to set, Joseph helped Maya sit up slowly. The movement made her dizzy, but she managed to stay upright with his support. For the first time in days, Maya felt like she might actually survive this experience. Joseph pulled more supplies from his saddlebags. He had traveled light, but he carried the essentials for surviving in difficult country. He gave Maya small pieces of dried meat, waiting to make sure she could keep them down before offering more. Eat very slowly, he advised. Your stomach has been empty too long. If you eat too much too fast, you'll just lose it all. While Maya ate, Joseph began preparing for the night. He gathered dry wood for a fire, choosing pieces that would burn long and steady. He positioned his horse where she could graze on the sparse desert grass, but still provide wind protection for their small camp. Won't a fire attract dangerous animals? Maya asked, her voice still rough but much stronger than it had been. Joseph smiled, and Maya saw both kindness and deep confidence in his expression. Fire keeps some animals away, but mostly it gives us light and warmth. The desert gets cold at night and your body needs warmth to recover. As darkness fell, Joseph built a small, efficient fire. The flames cast dancing shadows on the red rock walls around them, and Maya felt safer than she had since leaving her truck. The fire was more than just heat and light. It was a symbol of human presence in the vast wilderness. Joseph continued talking as he worked, sharing more stories about his ancestors and their relationship with the land. He spoke about reading weather patterns and cloud formations, finding water by following animal tracks, and understanding the desert's rhythms. This time of year, the morning dew is heaviest just before sunrise, Joseph explained. If you know how to collect it properly, you can get enough moisture to keep going for another day. Maya realized that Joseph was teaching her, passing on survival knowledge that could save her life if she ever found herself in this situation again. But more than that, he was sharing a different way of understanding the world, one based on observation, patience, and deep respect for natural forces. How did you know to find me? Maya asked as they sat by the fire. Joseph was quiet for a long moment, staring into the flames. When he answered, his voice was thoughtful and careful. I've been having dreams about this place for weeks, he said. Dreams of someone calling for help from under an old tree. My grandmother always told me to pay attention to dreams like that. She said they were messages about where we were needed. Maya felt goosebumps rise on her arms despite the warmth of the fire. The idea that Joseph had been guided here by dreams and visions was both mystical and somehow completely reasonable. After what she had experienced, Maya was ready to believe in forces beyond her normal understanding. Joseph continued his care throughout the night, waking every hour to check on Maya and give her more water. He never seemed to fully sleep, maintaining the constant awareness of someone who had spent many nights in the wilderness. In the old days, Joseph told her during one of these midnight checks, my people believed that saving someone's life created a special connection. Not ownership, but responsibility. When you save someone, you become partly responsible for how they use the life you've given back to them. Maya thought about this as she lay wrapped in Joseph's spare blanket, looking up at the incredible display of stars above them. Her life had been saved by ancient knowledge and traditional wisdom. She was alive because someone had maintained connections to old ways of living and understanding. As the night wore on, Maya began to understand that her rescue was about more than just being found by the right person at the right time. She had been found by someone who carried centuries of accumulated wisdom about surviving. In harmony with difficult environments, Joseph represented something Maya had studied in books but never experienced directly, the living continuation of ancient human knowledge. He was a bridge between the modern world she came from and the timeless wisdom of people who had thrived in places where she had nearly died. By dawn, Maya felt strong enough to sit up on her own and eat a larger meal. Joseph nodded approvingly as he watched her recovery, but Maya could see he was already thinking about the next challenge, getting her back to safety in a world very different from the one where his knowledge had saved her life. On Maya's second morning with Joseph, she woke to the sound of him talking quietly to his horse. The sun was just beginning to rise, painting the desert in soft shades of pink and gold. For the first time in over a week, Maya felt genuinely hopeful about seeing another sunset. Joseph had already been up for an hour, reading the sky and the wind like a weather report written in a language Maya didn't know. He moved around their small camp with quiet efficiency, gathering information from signs she couldn't even see. "Storm coming in 2 days," he announced matter-of-factly as Maya sat up. "We need to get you stronger and start moving toward town." Maya looked at the clear blue sky and wondered how Joseph could possibly know about weather that was still days away. But she had learned not to question his knowledge about things she didn't understand. Joseph had found new sources of water during his early morning exploration. He led Maya to a small depression in the rocks where rainwater from previous storms had collected and been naturally filtered through layers of stone. The water was clear and cool, much better than the bitter liquid Maya had found in the cactus days earlier. "My great-grandmother taught me to find water like this," Joseph explained as Maya drank deeply. "She said the earth knows how to clean water if you know where to look for the places where it does the work." While Maya regained her strength, Joseph continued teaching her about desert survival. He showed her which plants were safe to eat and which ones would make her sick. He demonstrated how to identify underground water sources by reading the landscape and watching animal behavior. "See how the grass grows greener in that line over there?" Joseph pointed to a subtle change in vegetation that Maya would never have noticed. "That means water flows underground in that direction, even when you can't see it on the surface." Joseph also taught Maya about the desert's daily rhythms. He showed her how the behavior of birds and insects could predict changes in weather hours before humans would notice them. He explained how to read the patterns in sand and rock that revealed the safest routes through difficult terrain. But Joseph's teaching went beyond just survival techniques. He shared a completely different way of thinking about the relationship between humans and the natural world. "Your people see the desert as something to fight against or conquer," Joseph observed as they walked slowly through the landscape. "My people learned to see it as a teacher. Everything that lives here successfully has learned the same lessons. We just had to be smart enough to learn them too." Maya found herself seeing the desert through new eyes. Plants that had seemed sparse and struggling now appeared perfectly adapted to their environment. Animals that had seemed absent were actually everywhere, just living according to different schedules and patterns than she had expected. "This whole area is like a library," Joseph continued. "Every rock formation, every type of plant, every animal track tells you something about how to live here successfully. You just have to learn how to read the language." On their second day together, Joseph led Maya to a place that took her breath away. Hidden in a narrow canyon was a natural spring surrounded by green plants and even a few small trees. The water bubbled up from deep underground, creating a tiny oasis in the harsh desert landscape. "This place has been used by travelers for hundreds of years," Joseph told her as they rested in the welcome shade. "My ancestors knew about it. Probably your ancestors did too if they came through this country." Joseph showed Maya ancient symbols carved into the rocks around the spring. Some were obviously very old, worn smooth by wind and time. Others looked more recent. All of them seemed to be messages left by people who had found this life-saving water source. Every group of people who survived in this country had to learn the same basic lessons, Joseph explained. Where to find water, when to travel, how to read the weather. The symbols are different, but the knowledge they represent is the same. Maya realized she was looking at something she had studied in books but never fully understood, the actual practice of ancient wisdom traditions. Joseph wasn't just telling her stories about old ways of life. He was demonstrating living knowledge that connected him directly to centuries of accumulated human experience. As they prepared to leave the spring, Joseph performed a small ceremony that Maya didn't completely understand but found deeply moving. He spoke words in Lakota, while placing a small offering of tobacco near the water source. "We take what we need and give thanks," Joseph explained simply. "That's how you keep the balance." Over the next day, as they traveled slowly toward the nearest town, Joseph continued sharing knowledge that he had learned not just from books or schools, but from a lifetime of paying attention to the world around him. He showed Maya how to walk efficiently in sand and rocky terrain, how to conserve energy in extreme heat, and how to stay oriented without a compass by reading natural landmarks. But more importantly, he demonstrated a way of moving through the world with awareness and respect. "Most people who get in trouble out here make the same mistake," Joseph observed as they rested during the hottest part of the day. "They fight against the country instead of learning from it." They try to force their own rules on a place that has its own rules. Maya understood that Joseph was teaching her something much larger than desert survival. He was sharing a philosophy of life based on observation, adaptation, and humility in the face of forces larger than any individual human. By the third day of their journey together, Maya felt strong enough to help with camp duties and even to assist Joseph in reading the landscape. She was beginning to see patterns and signs that had been invisible to her just days earlier. "You're learning," Joseph said approvingly as Maya correctly identified tracks left by a family of javelinas. "The knowledge is there for anyone who takes time to look and listen." As they approached the outskirts of civilization, Maya felt a strange mixture of relief and sadness. Relief because she would soon be safe and able to contact her family. Sadness because she knew her time with Joseph was ending, and she was learning things that could change her entire understanding of the world. "Will I see you again?" Maya asked as they caught sight of buildings in the distance. Joseph smiled, but his expression was thoughtful. "That depends on what you do with what you've learned out here. Knowledge like this needs to be used and shared, or it gets forgotten." Maya understood that Joseph was giving her a challenge along with his teachings. She had been saved by ancient wisdom and traditional knowledge. Now she had a responsibility to honor that gift by finding ways to preserve and share what she had learned. The small border town of Esperanza appeared like a mirage in the distance, but this time, Maya knew it was real. After 8 days in the desert, the sight of electric power lines, paved roads, and buildings with air conditioning felt almost overwhelming. Joseph guided Skydancer down the main street while Maya walked beside them, still weak but determined to cover the final distance on her own feet. People stopped to stare at the unusual pair, an elderly Native American man on horseback and a sunburned young woman who looked like she had been through an ordeal. The local clinic was a small building painted bright blue with Spanish words on the sign. Dr. Elena Rodriguez came out to meet them, taking one look at Maya and immediately understanding the situation. "Dehydration and exposure," she said in accented English, helping Maya toward the building. "How many days?" 8 days total," Maya answered, her voice still rough. "But he found me on the 7th day." Dr. Rodriguez looked at Joseph with new respect. "You saved her life, didn't you?" Joseph nodded simply. "She needed help. Anyone would have done the same." While Dr. Rodriguez examined Maya and started an IV to restore her fluids and electrolytes, Joseph waited outside with Skydancer. Maya could see him through the window, talking quietly to his horse while people from the town came by to speak with him. Maya learned later that Joseph was known in the area. He had helped lost travelers before, and local people had deep respect for his knowledge of the desert. But no one had expected him to be so far south, tracking horses that had wandered hundreds of miles from their usual territory. "He says the horses led him to you," Dr. Rodriguez told Maya as she checked her blood pressure. "Do you believe that?" Maya thought about everything that had happened. The timing of Joseph's appearance, his dreams about finding someone under a tree, the way he had known exactly how to help her recover. "Yes," she said finally. "I believe it." After Maya had been stabilized and her family contacted, she sat with Joseph outside the clinic as the sun began to set. For the first time since their meeting, they had time to really talk about what had happened and what it meant. "The place where I found you," Joseph began slowly. "It's not just any location. My grandmother told me stories about that area. It's a place where my people used to go for vision quests to receive guidance and spiritual direction." Maya felt chills run down her arms despite the warm evening air. "I was doing research on ancient rock paintings. I was trying to prove that different tribes had met and traded in that region." Joseph smiled. "They did more than trade there. They shared knowledge, stories, ceremonies. It was a place where different peoples came together to learn from each other." Maya understood then that her experience had been about more than just survival and rescue. She had been brought to a sacred place where for centuries people had come seeking wisdom and transformation. Her near-death experience and rescue had connected her to that ancient tradition in a way that no amount of academic research could have achieved. Over the next few days, as Maya recovered in the small motel that served as the town's only lodging, she and Joseph spent hours talking. Joseph shared stories about Lakota history, traditional ecological knowledge, and the importance of maintaining connections to ancestral wisdom. Maya told Joseph about her research, her dreams of preserving knowledge about ancient cultures, and her frustration with academic approaches that treated indigenous wisdom as historical curiosity rather than living knowledge. Maybe, Joseph suggested one evening as they sat on the motel's small porch, there's a way to bring these different approaches together. Maya looked at him with growing excitement. What do you mean? Joseph was quiet for a long moment, looking out at the desert landscape that stretched endlessly in all directions. Your people have ways of preserving and sharing knowledge that reach many people. My people have knowledge that needs to be preserved and shared. Maybe we can help each other. That conversation became the beginning of something neither of them had expected when they first met under the mesquite tree. Maya's research project evolved from a simple study of ancient rock art into a collaborative documentation project that brought together academic research methods with traditional knowledge systems. Joseph agreed to work with Maya to create a comprehensive record of traditional ecological knowledge related to desert survival and navigation. But more than just recording information, they developed educational programs that taught both traditional survival skills and academic research methods. Maya's dissertation became the foundation for a new approach to studying ancient cultures, one that treated indigenous knowledge holders as partners and teachers rather than subjects of study. Joseph became a visiting instructor at Maya's university, teaching courses on traditional ecological knowledge and indigenous approaches to environmental education. Their collaboration attracted attention from researchers around the world who were looking for ways to bridge the gap between academic knowledge and traditional wisdom. Maya and Joseph began traveling together, presenting their work at conferences and workshops where they demonstrated how ancient knowledge could inform modern approaches to environmental challenges. But perhaps most importantly, their partnership helped preserve knowledge that might otherwise have been lost. Joseph's stories, techniques, and wisdom were documented not just in academic papers, but in videos, interactive programs, and hands-on workshops that allowed people to experience traditional knowledge directly. Knowledge is only alive when it's being used, Joseph often said during their presentations. When we share what we know with people who can use it and pass it on, we keep the wisdom of our ancestors alive for future generations. Maya's near-death experience in the desert had taught her something that no classroom or library could have provided. She had learned the difference between studying knowledge and living knowledge, between reading about survival and actually surviving with the help of traditional wisdom. Years later, when Maya looked back on those 8 days in the desert, she understood that her physical rescue had been only the beginning. Joseph had not only saved her life, but had introduced her to a way of understanding and relating to the world that had transformed everything about how she approached her work and her life. The ancient petroglyphs that had originally drawn Maya to the desert became part of a much larger project documenting the continuity of indigenous knowledge across centuries. But now Maya understood those rock paintings not as artifacts from a dead past, but as messages from living traditions that continued to offer wisdom for anyone willing to learn. Joseph often said that their meeting had been arranged by forces beyond their understanding, that Maya's whispered prayer under the mesquite tree had been heard and answered by the same spirits that had guided his dreams. Whether or not that was literally true, both of them knew that their encounter had created something valuable and lasting, a bridge between worlds that honored both ancient wisdom and modern possibilities. Their friendship and collaboration became a model for how different knowledge systems could support and enhance each other, creating understanding that was richer and more complete than either could achieve alone. In saving Maya's life, Joseph had also helped save and share the traditional knowledge that had made that rescue possible. And in learning from Joseph, Maya had found a way to make her academic work serve the larger purpose of preserving wisdom that the world desperately needed.